The air was cold, sharper than usual, biting at my skin as I stood outside the Grant Carter estate. My fingers trembled, but not from the chill. A bright golden banner fluttered over the entrance, glowing under the warm lights of the extravagant mansion. No dogs and Emily allowed. The words were bold, unmissable, cruel. I clenched my fists. I had expected it. Tonight was Ryan Carter's birthday, the man I had loved for over 20 years, the man I had clung to in my past life, believing we were meant to be. But in that life, all I got was betrayal, torment, and a slow, agonizing death at sea. This time, things would be different. I glanced at the sign again. The insult that should have crushed me, reduced me to tears, did nothing but fuel the fire inside me. I was reborn. And I was free. The past life had been a tragedy of my own making. I had walked willingly into that storm, believing love could change a man's heart. I had thought my persistence would win over Ryan's cold indifference. I was wrong. His true love had always been Claire. That same Claire who had leaped off a cliff in my past life, taking her own life and leaving behind nothing but a ghostly presence between me and Ryan. A shadow I could never escape. He had blamed me for her death. He had called me a murderer, unleashed years of abuse on me, watched me suffer, break, and beg, until he finally let me drown at sea, treating my death as if it were nothing more than an afterthought. And yet, in my final moments, as the icy waves swallowed me whole, I saw the truth. Claire was alive. She had faked her death. She had built a new life, a new identity, and had returned as a world-famous designer, celebrating a love story that never should have been. And I had been the only fool. Not anymore. Tonight, I wasn't going to beg to enter Ryan's party. I wasn't going to linger outside, waiting for a moment of kindness that would never come. Tonight, I would turn my back on it all. A sharp gust of wind carried the sound of laughter from inside the estate. Music, chatter, clinking glasses, a celebration filled with people who believed themselves superior, people who had always looked down on me. I took a deep breath and turned away. Let them laugh. Let them celebrate. I had my own plans. Instead of standing outside like a forgotten stray, I had booked the earliest flight to Hawaii. It was a place Ryan had once spoken of longingly, a dream vacation he had never taken. In my past life, I had planned to surprise him with a trip there, foolishly thinking it would make him love me. He never went. Instead, he had gone camping with Claire, dragging me along like an unwanted burden, only to send me into the storm for a worthless bracelet. I had nearly died that night. This time, I wasn't waiting for his approval. I was taking that trip for myself. With a newfound lightness in my steps, I walked toward the waiting car. But just as I reached the gates, a voice cut through the night. Emily. The name echoed, filled with something I had never heard in it before, the shock. I turned, meeting the piercing gaze of Ryan Carter. There he was, my executioner from the past life. His dark eyes burned into mine, not with the usual disgust, but with something unfamiliar. Was it disbelief? Confusion? Fear? I didn't care. Ryan took a step forward. If you come with me now, I'll forgive you for this little joke. I nearly laughed out loud. Forgive me? As if I had done something wrong. He still thought I was the same Emily, the desperate girl who would do anything for a chance to stay by his side. I glanced toward the mansion entrance, toward the golden sign that still fluttered mockingly in the wind. No dogs and Emily allowed. Tears welled in my eyes, not from pain, but from sheer joy. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the first step toward a different life. A better one. I smiled, slow and steady, and met Ryan's gaze. No, I said. I don't need your forgiveness. I never needed it. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving Ryan standing frozen under the glow of his own birthday lights. This time, I wasn't looking back. I barely glanced back as I walked away from Ryan Carter's mansion, my heart beating with a strange, unfamiliar sensation. Relief. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I wasn't running toward Ryan, I was running away. And God, it felt good. I heard him call my name again, but I didn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Not for him. Not anymore. As I stepped into the car, my driver, an older man with tired eyes, gave me a brief glance in the rearview mirror. "Where to, miss?" "Hawaii," I said firmly. The words felt unreal. For 20 years, I had built my life around Ryan Carter's moods, his wants, his rejections. Every decision I made had revolved around him. But now, I was doing something for myself. The car pulled away from the estate, the golden banner shrinking in the distance. I breathed. The drive home was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. Every memory of my past life crashed over me in waves, each one more painful than the last. I had spent years trying to be the perfect woman for Ryan. When he was stressed, I arranged vacations for him. When he was sick, I took care of him. When he needed me, I was always there. And how had he repaid me? With disgust. With cruelty. With Claire. I clenched my fists. In my past life, I had given him everything. My love, my time, my dignity. And in return, he had blamed me for Claire's death, called me a murderer, shattered my life piece by piece. And the worst part? I had still loved him. I had still wanted him to love me back. What a fool I had been. But not anymore. This time, I would live. By the time I arrived at the Carter estate, my temporary home, I had already made up my mind. I was leaving. Tonight. I moved quickly, stripping off my carefully chosen dress, the one I had worn just to be rejected at Ryan's party. It pooled on the floor like the last remnants of my old self. Then, I grabbed my suitcase and packed. Clothes. Documents. Everything I would need for a fresh start. In my past life, I had waited years to leave Ryan. This time, I wouldn't wait another second. Just as I zipped up my suitcase and turned toward the door, it slammed open. Ryan. His broad frame filled the doorway, his tailored suit crisp, his expression twisted in irritation. For a brief second, I felt a flicker of something old, the automatic, trained instinct to care about his mood, to try and please him. But I shoved it down. He wasn't my concern anymore. Ryan's sharp gaze swept over my suitcase, his expression darkening. Then, he let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Are you serious, Emily?" I met his eyes evenly. Dead serious. His jaw tightened. "You're still pulling this childish runaway act? What's next, a dramatic suicide threat?" His voice dripped with mockery, as if the very idea of me leaving was a joke. A joke. That was what I had been to him. A joke. A burden. A thing that refused to go away. Not this time. I lifted my chin. "Who told you I was going to kill myself?" Ryan scoffed, but something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty. I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. "Ryan, listen carefully, I'm not leaving because of you. I'm leaving because I don't want to be here anymore. Because I don't want to waste another second of my life chasing after someone who never wanted me." Ryan blinked, as if my words were somehow incomprehensible. Good. Let him choke on them. Before he could respond, another voice cut in. "Ryan, don't be too hard on her," a soft, delicate voice murmured. Claire. She stepped into the room, dressed in a flowing white gown, her long, perfect curls cascading down her back. The very picture of innocence. And yet, I knew better. Claire wasn't innocent. She had always played the victim, always twisted the truth, always won. And in my past life, I had been too blind, too in love with Ryan, to see through her. But now? Now I saw her for what she truly was. Claire reached out, as if to take my hand, her fingers brushing mine. Her nails dug into my skin, a sharp, hidden warning. If you wanted to come to the party, she whispered, you could have just asked Ryan properly. You two grew up together, you're practically siblings. Why would he not let you in? Her voice was gentle, but her words were a trap. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to snap. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I smiled. Oh, I didn't want to come. Claire's eyes flickered, just for a second. I tilted my head. And for the record? Ryan and I aren't siblings. We were engaged. Or did you forget? Claire opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Actually, it doesn't matter, I continued smoothly. Because after tonight, I won't be engaged to him anymore. Ryan stiffened. Emily, I turned to him, my voice steady. I'm leaving, Ryan. And this time, you won't be able to stop me. Claire gasped dramatically, stepping toward him. Ryan, let her go, she pleaded. She's just upset, Ryan's hand shot out. Not toward Claire. Toward me. Before I could react, he shoved me. I stumbled back, my head slamming against the hard edge of the staircase. Pain exploded through my skull. The room spun. For a moment, everything blurred, the chandelier above, the flickering shadows, Claire's fake horrified expression, Ryan's fury. You're disgusting, Ryan snapped, his voice sharp with rage. You just can't stop bullying people, can you? I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stay conscious. My vision swam, but I refused to look weak in front of him. Through the pain, I managed to push myself up. And I smiled. Because I had one. Don't worry, I murmured, wiping the warm, sticky blood from the back of my head. You won't have to breathe the same air as me anymore. Ryan's eyes flickered, just for a second. Was it shock? Guilt? Fear? I didn't care. I turned toward the door, dragging my suitcase behind me. Claire gasped, clutching Ryan's arm. Ryan, are you really going to let her go like this? She whispered. Ryan's jaw clenched. Let her leave, he muttered. I don't care. Good. Because I wasn't coming back. I made it outside, my legs shaking, my head throbbing. The night air was cold against my skin, but I barely felt it. I had done it. I had broken free. But just as I reached for my phone, ready to call a cab, a quiet voice interrupted my thoughts. Do you need help? I turned. A man stood nearby, dressed in black hoodie, black cap, black mask. Everything about him screamed mystery. But his eyes were warm. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, someone was offering me help. Not out of pity. Not out of obligation. But simply because they wanted to. I swallowed hard. I had no one now. No family. No home. But for some reason, I didn't feel alone. I exhaled slowly. And for the first time, I let someone else step into my story. And change it. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fresh linens, a stark contrast to the suffocating world I had just left behind. My head still throbbed, a dull ache pulsing at the base of my skull where Ryan had shoved me. But I was alive. And more importantly, I was free. I shifted slightly in bed, the crisp sheets rustling against my skin. Beside me, the man in black sat with his head resting on his arms, his face hidden beneath a hood. His entire posture screamed exhaustion, yet he had stayed. Why? Something about him felt oddly familiar. Not in a way that triggered memories from my past life, but in a way that stirred curiosity. I hesitated for a second before reaching out, my fingers brushing against the curls peeking out from under his hood. Soft. The moment I touched his hair, he jolted awake, his body tensing as his eyes, large, deep, and filled with surprise, met mine. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then, as if realizing what had happened, he hurriedly pulled his mask up, his face turning slightly red. I blinked. That reaction was unexpected. Most men would have either brushed it off or made some offhand comment. But not him. His response was almost shy, awkward even. Something about it made my lips twitch. "Sorry," I murmured, lowering my hand. "Your hair looked soft." He cleared his throat, his voice a little hoarse. Thanks?" I arched an eyebrow. Was he embarrassed? It was almost amusing, this mysterious man, dressed like someone trying to hide from the world, was blushing over something as small as a touch. I studied him more closely. Underneath the mask, I could see sharp features, a well-defined jawline, and eyes that looked too gentle for someone who dressed like an outlaw. Then it clicked. I knew who he was. My eyes widened slightly. "You're Sean." His shoulders stiffened. A second of silence. Then, he let out a sigh, rubbing the back of his head. "So, you do recognize me?" Of course, I did. Sean was once part of a famous boy band, a group that had skyrocketed to fame, only to fall apart just as quickly. He had been the quiet one, the member who never sought attention yet somehow always caught people's eyes. After the group disbanded, he disappeared from the public eye. And now, here he was, sitting beside me in a hospital room. Sean glanced at me, his brows slightly furrowed. "You were unconscious when I found you outside the Carter estate. Do you remember what happened?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah. I remembered everything. Ryan. Claire. The pain. The moment I finally walked away." Sean tilted his head slightly, his eyes scanning my expression. "Was it Ryan?" I let out a humorless laugh. Of course, it was. He didn't say anything for a moment. But his hands, which were resting on his knees, clenched slightly. "Do you need me to introduce you to a lawyer?" he asked softly. His voice was careful, controlled. But I caught the hint of something underneath it. Concern. I blinked. He barely knew me. Why was he offering to help? I should have felt wary. Suspicious. But instead, for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. I shook my head. No lawyer. At least, not yet. Ryan was powerful, and dragging him into legal trouble would take time. Right now, my priority was leaving. I had wasted too many years in River City. I needed distance. Sean studied me for a second before nodding. "If you change your mind, let me know." I offered him a small smile. "Thanks." A comfortable silence settled between us. It was strange, being around someone and not feeling on edge. Finally, after a few minutes, Sean cleared his throat again. "Are you hungry?" I thought about it. Between getting rejected at Ryan's party and ending up in the hospital, I hadn't eaten all day. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Ryan. My stomach twisted. He was calling me. What now? I debated ignoring it, but a part of me knew he wouldn't stop until I picked up. With a sigh, I answered. Emily. His voice was hoarse, laced with exhaustion. And something else. Regret? Pain? Panic? I stayed silent. He exhaled sharply. Claire lost the baby. I stilled. His child. The baby he had accused me of killing. Ryan's breath was uneven. It was my first child, Emily. How could you be so cruel? I let out a slow, measured breath. Ryan, I said evenly, you do realize you could have just annulled our engagement at any time, right? It wasn't hard. Just one word from you, and it would have been over. Silence. I continued, my voice sharper now. So why didn't you do it? Was it because you wanted to have your cake and eat it too? Because you wanted me to be the pathetic fiancé waiting at home while you played house with Claire? His breathing grew heavier. I let out a small laugh. Maybe it's my fault. I let you treat me like trash for so long that now, you don't know how to let go. More silence. Then, he muttered, Emily, Ryan. I cut him off, my tone turning ice cold. You really are an idiot. Then, without another word, I hung up. I tossed the phone aside, exhaling deeply. I should have felt angry. Or hurt. Instead, I just felt tired. Ryan was nothing to me now. And the best part? He knew it. Across from me, Sean shifted slightly. Was that your ex? I sighed. Something like that. Sean didn't press. Instead, he nodded toward my phone. Do you need help dealing with him? I studied him for a moment. Help. It wasn't something I was used to accepting. I had spent my entire past life trying to prove I didn't need it. But this time, I wasn't going to fight alone. I leaned back against the pillows, a slow smile forming on my lips. Actually, there's something you can help me with. Sean raised an eyebrow. What is it? I grabbed my phone, pulled up the camera, and snapped a quick picture, our hands intertwined, fingers forming a heart shape. Then, without hesitation, I posted it. The caption was simple. Officially taken. Ryan wanted to control my life? Fine. Let's see how he reacts when he realizes I've already moved on. As soon as I hit post, my notifications exploded. People panicked. Ryan's friends rushed to message me. The internet lost its mind. And somewhere in the city, I knew Ryan was watching. I smiled. Let the games begin. The moment I posted the picture, my phone exploded. Notifications flooded in, messages, comments, calls. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly concerned, asking if I had been hacked. Others, mostly Ryan's friends, were demanding an explanation. And Ryan? He was losing his mind. I didn't even need to check my messages to know it. I could imagine it perfectly, him sitting in his penthouse, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His jaw clenched, his expression dark and unreadable. Because for the first time ever, I had done something without his permission. For 20 years, I had been predictable. Easy to control. But this was a declaration of war. I tossed my phone onto the hospital bed and stretched my arms lazily, a satisfied smile tugging at my lips. Across from me, Sean watched me with mild curiosity, his arms crossed over his chest. You look way too happy, he commented. I shrugged. Let's just say I finally did something I should have done a long time ago. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze flickering toward my phone. So, who's panicking the most right now? Your ex or his girlfriend? I laughed. Both, probably. Claire would be furious. She thrived on attention, on being the delicate, fragile victim. But now? Now she had competition. And Ryan? Ryan was probably fighting an internal battle between rage and denial. Because in his mind, I was still his. Even though he never wanted me, even though he had thrown me away over and over again, he still believed I belonged to him. And that was exactly why this picture was driving him insane. Sean sat back in his chair, a small smirk playing on his lips. Well, I have to say, you're handling this breakup like a pro. I rolled my eyes. Who said I was broken up about it? He raised an eyebrow. You just posted a fake relationship announcement 2 days after walking away from him. That's basically a public middle finger. I grinned. Exactly. Sean let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. You're kind of scary, you know that? I tilted my head. Does that mean you want to back out? His smirk widened. No way. This is entertaining. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. I sighed, glancing at the caller ID. Ryan. For a second, I debated ignoring it. But then, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. What? I said flatly. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a low, tense voice. Who is he? Bingo. I bit my lip to hold back a laugh. Who? Ryan's breathing was heavy. Don't play dumb, Emily. Who's the guy in the picture? I hummed. Wouldn't you like to know? Ryan cursed under his breath. Are you serious right now? I stretched out on the hospital bed, my tone as casual as if we were discussing the weather. Ryan, you're acting like a jealous boyfriend. But that's funny, isn't it? Because last time I checked, you didn't even want me. Silence. A sharp, tense silence. Then, his voice dropped lower. I don't care who you play around with, Emily. But if you think this childish stunt is going to make me, I laughed. A cold, sharp sound. Ryan, I cut him off, you don't get to tell me what I can or can't do anymore. I could practically feel his frustration through the phone. Then, his voice turned colder. You're doing this just to get back at me. I smirked. And what if I am? Ryan let out a sharp exhale. Emily, listen to me, I hung up. Just like that. Sean let out a low whistle. Damn. You really don't care anymore, do you? I met his gaze and smiled. No, I said softly. I really don't. And it felt amazing. The aftermath the next few days were chaos. Ryan called me at least 20 times. I blocked him. He used different numbers. I blocked those, too. His friends tried to reach out, sending long, dramatic messages about how I was being immature, how I was hurting Ryan. I ignored them. Then, Claire made her move. I woke up to see my name trending online. Claire Carter opens up about her miscarriage, blames fiancé's ex for stress. I read the headline twice before I laughed out loud. This woman was unbelievable. I clicked on the article. There she was, sitting in a hospital bed, tears streaming down her face, her hands resting gently on her stomach. She looked so delicate, so heartbroken, that even I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The article went on about how I had ruined her happiness, how my cruelty had caused so much stress that she lost her baby. What a performance. But she had made one big mistake. She had underestimated me. I grabbed my phone, my fingers moving fast. I went live. The screen flashed, and within seconds, thousands of viewers flooded in. I looked directly into the camera. Let's talk about lies. The chat exploded. I leaned forward. Claire, sweetie, if you're going to lie, at least make it believable. People spammed the comments. OMG, what's happening? She's calling out Claire. This is insane. I tilted my head. You say I caused your miscarriage. But tell me, Claire, how? How did I do that when I haven't even spoken to you in days? I pulled up my medical report on screen, showing the injuries Ryan had given me. See this? This is from your fiancé. Maybe you should focus on that instead of making up fake stories. People lost their minds. The tide shifted. By the next day, Claire was completely exposed. Ryan? Ryan was silent. I smirked. Game, set, match. Ryan's breaking point that night, my phone rang again. I picked up. Ryan's voice was low. Emily. I stayed silent. His voice shook. Come back. I blinked. What? He took a deep breath. Come back to me. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Then, I laughed. A short, cold laugh. Ryan, I said slowly, you really are something else. His voice was raw. I see Claire for who she is now. She means nothing to me. I let out a slow exhale. Ryan, let me ask you something, I murmured. Why do you want me back? Silence. I smirked. Because for the first time, you can't control me? His breath hitched. I shook my head. Ryan. I'd rather die than ever go back to you. Then, for the last time, I hung up. And I never answered him again. The moment I hung up on Ryan, I knew this was it. I was finally free. No more waiting for his approval. No more suffering under his cruelty. No more Emily, the pathetic, desperate fiancé. That Emily was dead. And I was reborn. I exhaled slowly, staring at my phone screen. Ryan had broken. For the first time in his privileged, perfect life, someone had walked away from him and not looked back. And he couldn't handle it. He thought he could snap his fingers and I'd come running. That I'd always come running. But he didn't realize that this time, I had nothing left to give. I wasn't his safety net anymore. I was done. Packing up the past the next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went apartment hunting. It was funny, really. I had spent my entire life in the Carter estate, waiting for Ryan to acknowledge me, waiting for a place in his world. And now? Now I was building my own. By the end of the day, I had signed a lease for a small but cozy apartment, just a one-bedroom, nothing fancy. But to me? It was perfect. Because it was mine. No more cold, empty rooms. No more maids who pretended I didn't exist. No more waking up to Ryan's cruelty. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I had a home that belonged to me. And I couldn't wait to move in. Ryan's obsession begins, but of course, Ryan wasn't done. Even after I ignored his calls. Even after I blocked his number. Even after I made it painfully clear that I wanted nothing to do with him. He still wouldn't let go. At first, it was little things. Random text messages from unknown numbers. Flowers delivered to my new apartment. A black car that seemed to always be parked across the street. Then, it got worse. One night, as I was heading home, I noticed someone following me. I wasn't paranoid. I knew what stalking felt like, I had lived it in my past life. And right now? Someone was definitely watching me. I turned a corner, stepping into a small cafe, pretending to browse the menu. My heartbeat quickened. I waited, watching through the reflection of the glass window. And then, I saw him. Ryan. He was standing across the street, his hands buried in his pockets, his gaze locked on me. I froze. My breath hitched. For a moment, a terrible, familiar fear gripped my chest. Not again. I had escaped once. I wasn't going to let him pull me back. But just as I was about to walk away, someone stepped between us. A warm, solid presence. Sean. He had appeared out of nowhere, standing protectively in front of me, blocking Ryan's view. His voice was calm but firm. You okay? I swallowed, forcing my heart to steady. Yeah. He didn't look convinced. His sharp gaze flickered toward the street, where Ryan was still standing, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. Then, Sean did something unexpected. He reached down and took my hand. His fingers curled around mine, warm, steady. Ryan stiffened. I felt it, the exact moment realization hit him. I wasn't his anymore. I had moved on. His jaw clenched, his entire body going rigid. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Defeated. For the first time, Ryan Carter had lost. And I had one. A different kind of love. We didn't talk about Ryan that night. Instead, Sean took me to dinner. It wasn't some expensive, flashy restaurant. No candlelit tables, no dramatic confessions. Just a quiet place by the ocean, where the salty breeze mixed with the scent of fresh seafood. I watched as Sean rolled up his sleeves, carefully peeling shrimp with his fingers before placing them onto my plate. I blinked. He did it without thinking. Without trying to impress me. Without making a big deal out of it. And for some reason, that small gesture made my chest ache. Because I had spent my entire life chasing love. Begging for it. Fighting for it. Bleeding for it. And now, here was this man, this boy band turned actor with messy curls and warm eyes, showing me care in the simplest, quietest way. I stared at my plate. You don't have to do that. Sean shrugged, popping a shrimp into his mouth. I know. But he still did it. I felt something in my heart shift. For the first time, I wondered, what if love wasn't supposed to be painful? What if it wasn't supposed to be a battle? What if it was just this? Effortless. Simple. Easy. I didn't say anything. But as I looked at Sean, this man who didn't try to control me, who didn't demand anything from me, I realized something. Maybe love wasn't something I had to chase. Maybe the right person would never make me run at all. Ryan's last desperate move, but Ryan Carter? Ryan wasn't finished yet. The next day, I woke up to news headlines. Ryan had gone on live television. And he had said one thing that changed everything. Emily. I love you. The world erupted. The media went wild. Social media exploded. People flooded my inbox, demanding a response. And for a brief second, I felt nothing. Not excitement. Not happiness. Not hope. Just pity. Because I knew the truth. Ryan didn't love me. He just didn't want to lose. And unfortunately for him, he already had. I grabbed my phone and typed my response. Short. Brutal. Final. Ryan, you're 2 lifetimes too late. Then, I turned my phone off. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I finally let go. Completely. The moment I hit send, I knew it was over. Not just the engagement. Not just the past. Ryan Carter's hold on me was gone. For good. And it felt liberating. The aftermath of Ryan's live confession spread like wildfire. News anchors dissected his words. Gossip blogs speculated about our relationship. People flooded my inbox, demanding answers. But I ignored it all. Because the truth was simple, I didn't care. I wasn't the same girl who had once dreamed of hearing those words from him. In another life, Ryan's public declaration would have shattered me. I would have cried, screamed, begged, thrown myself back into his arms, desperate for the love he dangled in front of me like a cruel joke. But that Emily? She was gone. I was no longer the woman who loved blindly. I had changed. And no amount of public theatrics could bring me back. Ryan's final attempt, I should have expected it. Ryan wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. And after my brutal rejection, he did something desperate. He came to find me. It happened 2 nights later. I had just returned to my new apartment, exhausted from a full day of job interviews, when I heard the knock. It wasn't gentle. It was loud, insistent, demanding. For a split second, a cold fear gripped me. No. He wouldn't dare. I hesitated, then slowly approached the door, peering through the peephole. And there he was. Ryan Carter. Standing outside my apartment. Looking disheveled. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his normally perfect hair messy, his face shadowed with exhaustion. I almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the powerful, arrogant Ryan Carter I had once loved. This was a man on the edge. I exhaled sharply and opened the door. Ryan's head snapped up at the sound. The moment our eyes met, I saw it. The panic. The fear. The realization that I was truly slipping away from him. And it was killing him. "Emily," he breathed, stepping forward. I didn't move. I didn't let him in. Ryan swallowed hard. "Please. Just 5 minutes. That's all I need." I studied him. The old me would have caved instantly. But I wasn't the old me. I crossed my arms. 5 minutes. Then you leave. Ryan nodded quickly, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. Too late for that, Ryan. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Talk. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. I made a mistake. I arched an eyebrow. Which one? His jaw clenched. I should have chosen you. From the start. I felt nothing. Ryan, I said flatly. What do you want from me? He flinched. As if he hadn't expected me to be this, indifferent. As if he had hoped that some part of me still cared. I want to fix this, he said, his voice raw. I tilted my head. Fix what? Our engagement, he said quickly. Us. Everything. I let out a slow breath. Ryan. He froze. Then, I gave him a small, pitying smile. You still don't get it, do you? His eyes darkened. Get what? That there is no us. He went completely still. You lost me a long time ago, I continued. You just didn't notice. Ryan's breath hitched. Emily, I shook my head. No. You don't get to say my name like that. Not anymore. His face twisted. Why? Because of him? It took me a second to realize who he meant. Sean. I almost laughed. You think this is about Sean? Ryan's hands clenched into fists. You're really going to leave me for some guy you just met? I sighed. Ryan, I didn't leave you for anyone. I left you for myself. And that was the difference. Ryan's chest rose and fell sharply, his breathing erratic. You're really not coming back. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. The weight of it crashed over him like a wave, a truth he had been refusing to accept. I had walked away. And I wasn't turning back. His face crumbled. And for the first time, I saw it. Regret. Real, genuine regret. But it didn't matter. It was too late. I met his eyes one last time. Goodbye, Ryan. Then, without another word, I turned and walked inside, closing the door between us. And this time, I didn't just shut him out. I shut the past out with him. Moving forward the next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. I had spent 2 lifetimes carrying Ryan Carter. And now? Now I was finally free. And it felt like breathing for the first time. A new chapter begins a week later. I officially started my new job. A fresh start. A clean slate. No Ryan. No Claire. No past. Just me. Emily, the woman who finally chose herself. I spent my days working, my nights exploring the city. And Sean? He was still there. Somehow, without me realizing it, he had become a constant in my life. And one evening, as we sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he turned to me and smiled. You look happy, he said. I blinked. I am. He nodded. Good. Then, after a pause, he leaned in and murmured, I think I'd like to keep seeing you like this. My breath hitched. For a second, I didn't respond. Then, slowly, I smiled back. Maybe love wasn't something I had to chase. Maybe it had been waiting for me all along. The days passed like a dream. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, my world didn't revolve around Ryan Carter. I wasn't waking up dreading his moods. I wasn't checking my phone, hoping for his attention. I wasn't trapped in a life where I had to prove I was worthy of love. Because now, I loved myself. And with every passing day, I realized something else. Sean was different. He didn't try to control me. He didn't expect me to chase after him. He didn't demand my love, he simply stayed. And somehow, without me realizing it, he became my home. The slow burn of something real. Our relationship didn't explode into existence like a dramatic, messy romance novel. It grew. Like a quiet, steady flame that never flickered out. We spent nights cooking together, arguing over who got to taste test first. We took long walks by the ocean, where he'd casually slip his hand into mine. We'd sit on the couch after a long day, comfortable in silence. No grand declarations. No desperate confessions. Just us. And for the first time, I understood this was what love was supposed to feel like. Not painful. Not exhausting. Not a constant battle for approval. Just peace. The moment everything changed one night, we found ourselves on my balcony, looking out over the city lights. Sean leaned against the railing, his golden curls messy from the wind. I watched him from the corner of my eye, my heart strangely calm. He caught me staring and smirked. What? I shrugged. Nothing. His eyes softened. You're happy. I tilted my head. You always say that. Because it's true. I stared at him for a long moment, something warm and terrifying settling in my chest. Then, before I could overthink it, I said, Sean, I think I'm in love with you. His entire body froze. The world seemed to pause around us. Then, slowly, his lips curled into the softest, happiest smile I had ever seen. You think, he teased. I rolled my eyes. Fine. I know. He chuckled, shaking his head. Then, before I could process it, he closed the distance between us. His hands framed my face, gentle but sure. And then, he kissed me. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just right. And in that moment, I knew. I had finally found what I had been searching for all along. A love that wasn't painful. A love that didn't destroy me. A love that felt like home. Ryan's final goodbye. I thought Ryan Carter was gone from my life forever. I had made my peace. I had moved on. I had won. But life had one final twist left for me. It happened 6 months later. Sean and I had just returned from a vacation, our laughter still lingering in the air as we walked into my apartment. Then, my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. And the moment I did, my stomach dropped. A familiar voice, tired, broken. Emily. Ryan. I stiffened. What do you want? A long pause. Then, his voice, quieter than I had ever heard it. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I blinked. That was the last thing I expected. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he continued. But I needed to tell you. I regret everything. I swallowed. Ryan, I'm leaving River City. That stopped me. I frowned. What? He exhaled, sounding tired. My father cut me off. The Carter family is barely holding itself together after the Claire scandal. I lost everything. And for the first time, I realize why. I didn't speak. Ryan let out a bitter chuckle. You don't have to say anything. I needed you to know. That I see it now. Everything I did to you, everything I destroyed. I see it. I closed my eyes. For so long, I had dreamed of this moment. Of Ryan realizing what he lost. Of him apologizing, breaking down, suffering. But now that it was here? I just felt nothing. Ryan Carter wasn't my villain anymore. He was just a man I used to know. I took a deep breath. I hope you find peace, Ryan. He exhaled sharply, like my words had caught him off guard. Goodbye, Emily. Then, he hung up. And that was the last time I ever heard from Ryan Carter. The life I deserve. I stared at my phone for a long time after the call ended. Then, I turned to Sean, who had been watching quietly. You okay? He asked. I thought about it. Then, I smiled. Yeah. I'm okay. I walked toward him, wrapping my arms around his waist. He kissed the top of my head. Good. And just like that, I knew Ryan Carter was my past. And Sean was my future. A future I had built for myself. A future that finally belonged to me. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I had everything I ever wanted. A home that was truly mine. A job that I had earned on my own. A man who loved me without conditions. And most importantly, a life that was finally my own. No longer was I trapped in Ryan Carter's shadow. No longer was I begging for love that was never meant for me. I had moved on. And this time, nothing could pull me back. Settling into a new life, my days fell into a beautiful routine. Mornings filled with coffee and sleepy kisses from Sean. Afternoons spent working at a job that challenged and fulfilled me. Evenings wrapped in quiet laughter, tangled limbs, and whispered confessions. There were no grand dramas. No suffocating love that burned me alive. Just peace. Just happiness. And I had never known anything like it before. An unwanted visit, but just when I thought my past was truly behind me, Claire came back. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Sean and I were at a local bookstore, his fingers lazily tracing the spines of novels while I browsed the fiction aisle. Then, suddenly, Emily. I stiffened. That voice. I turned slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. And there she was. Claire. She looked different. The polished, perfect woman who had once ruled River City with her fake smiles and delicate tears? She was gone. The woman standing in front of me now was thinner, paler, hollow. Her once radiant beauty had dulled. And her eyes? Her eyes were desperate. Claire had fallen from grace. And she knew it. A conversation I never expected. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, Claire let out a brittle laugh. You look good, Emily, she said, her voice strained. Better than ever, actually. I tilted my head. Thanks. She exhaled sharply. You must be happy. You got what you wanted. I frowned. And what exactly did I want, Claire? She scoffed. To ruin me. To ruin Ryan. I held up a hand. Stop. Claire blinked, caught off guard. I met her gaze, my voice calm but firm. I didn't ruin you, Claire. You did that all on your own. Her face twisted. You faked your death. You manipulated Ryan. You made yourself the victim over and over again. I took a step forward. And guess what? It finally caught up to you. Claire trembled. For the first time, she had no defense. No lies. No carefully crafted sob story. Just the truth, laid bare between us. You destroyed yourself, Claire, I said quietly. Not me. Her eyes glistened with tears. For a second, I thought she might break down. But then, she let out a bitter, shaky laugh. You're right, she whispered. I lost everything. She swallowed hard. Ryan was my last chance, you know? My last shot at security. But she choked on a laugh. He was just as stupid as I was. A long silence stretched between us. Then, she sighed. Guess we were never really rivals, huh? I blinked. That was the first honest thing she had ever said to me. I shook my head. No, Claire. We weren't. She studied me for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. And that was the last time I ever saw Claire Carter. The final step forward that night, I sat on the rooftop of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Sean appeared beside me, handing me a warm cup of tea. You okay? He asked. I hummed, taking a slow sip. Yeah. Claire's visit didn't shake you? I thought about it. Then, I smiled. No, I said simply. It didn't. Sean let out a low chuckle. You really are free from them, huh? I turned to him. Yeah, I whispered. I am. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I believed it. A love that stays the next morning. Sean did something unexpected. He pulled me into his arms, his lips brushing against my temple. Emily, he murmured, his voice warm and sure. Marry me. I froze. My heart pounded. And then, I did something I never thought I would. I smiled. And I said yes. Because this time, I wasn't settling. I wasn't choosing pain. I was choosing love. Real love. The kind that stayed. The kind that felt like home. The words hung in the air between us, gentle yet certain. Marry me. For a moment, I didn't breathe. Not out of fear. Not out of doubt. But because this moment, this exact moment, was something I had never let myself believe I could have. A proposal that wasn't forced, manipulated, or built on lies. A proposal that wasn't given out of obligation or guilt. But a choice. A promise. I looked up at Sean, at the way his golden curls framed his face, at the warmth in his puppy-like eyes. And I knew. I had already made my decision long ago. I smiled. Yes. His breath hitched, just slightly. His hands trembled as he cupped my face, as if he couldn't believe this was real. Then, he kissed me. Slow. Tender. Everything Ryan's love had never been. And just like that, my past, the pain, the betrayals, the years of wasted love, all melted away. Because this was my future. And this time, I had chosen right. The wedding that was truly mine. I didn't want an extravagant, over-the-top wedding. I didn't want a grand ballroom filled with people who didn't care about us. I just wanted something simple. Something real. So we held a small ceremony on the beach, with only the people who mattered. Sean's manager cried. His bandmates, even the ones who had drifted away, showed up to cheer him on. And me? For the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing in someone else's story. This was mine. And as I stood under the golden sky, my fingers intertwined with Sean's, I realized I had never been happier. A final goodbye to the past. It wasn't until weeks later that I heard about Ryan again. By then, I barely thought about him anymore. But when I got a message from an old acquaintance, telling me Ryan had officially left the country, I paused. I wasn't sure what I felt. Pity? Relief? Or maybe, nothing at all. Ryan Carter had been my entire world once. And now? He was just a name I used to know. A memory that no longer held power over me. So, I did the one thing I should have done a long time ago. I deleted the message. And I moved on. For good. Happily ever after? 1 year later, I stood in front of the mirror, running my fingers over the growing curve of my belly. A soft, fluttering movement greeted me from the inside. I smiled. I never thought I'd get here. Never thought I'd find a love that didn't leave me empty. Never thought I'd have a home filled with laughter, warmth, and late-night cuddles. And yet, here I was. Sean entered the room, his hair still damp from the shower, wearing the same ridiculous floral apron he always wore when he cooked. "Hey," he said, walking over and wrapping his arms around me from behind. "How are my two favorite people doing today?" I laughed, resting my hands over his. "We're doing great." And I meant it. Because this was my real happily ever after. And this time, it had nothing to do with fate. It had nothing to do with chasing a love that was never meant for me. It was a future I had built with my own hands. A future I truly deserved.